desert heat hides the chill of the grave.
You think you know Tucson? You're wrong.
Beneath the saguaros, history doesn't just sleep, it screams. We're counting down the 15 most cursed locations in the old Pueblo. Close your windows, lock your doors, they're waiting. 1. Hotel Congress, Tucson. The Hotel Congress stands in Tucson like a baked terracotta monument to forgotten time. Its exterior warped by a century of desert sun and the residue of pivotal American history. It is a structure defined by proximity to violence and calamity. In January 1934, a devastating fire ripped through the upper floors, forcing the evacuation of its long-term residents. It was during this chaos that local authorities discovered a trunk of weapons, leading to the identification and eventual capture of John Dillinger and his notorious gang. While the history books focus on the infamous outlaw, the building itself remembers the residents, both victims and transients, who never truly checked out after the fire. The residual trauma surrounding the blaze and Dillinger's residency left deep, resonant scars on the remaining structure. Paranormal investigators frequently register intense, untraceable heat fluctuations, particularly near the main staircase and the second-floor landing areas. Most affected by the 1934 tragedy, reports consistently mention the quiet specter of an elderly woman, sometimes identified as a permanent resident who perished in the fire's aftermath, who often appears seated near the current Cup Cafe, knitting silently before abruptly vanishing. The most disturbing phenomena occur in the salvaged rooms upstairs. Guests routinely complain of the relentless, rhythmic thudding of unseen footfalls in the corridors, and the sound of muffled arguments or strained sobbing echoing from empty adjoining suites. Housekeeping staff are prone to finding perfectly made beds, violently unmade moments after leaving the room, the linen strewn across the floor as if a struggle had just concluded. This is the lingering reality of the Congress, a century-old stage perpetually occupied by unpaying, restless guests, caught forever in the loop of an emergency that happened long ago, waiting for an evacuation alarm that will never sound. 2. Old Tucson Studios, Tucson. The dust never truly settles on the backlots of Old Tucson Studios. It hangs in the desert air, smelling of creosote and faded gunpowder, a perpetual scrim across the false fronts and dusty streets where countless westerns were shot. But as the sun dips behind the Tucson mountains, casting long, skeletal shadows across the empty sound stages, the dust seems to hold more than just fine silt. It holds the echoes of violence and forgotten tragedy, long since written out of the script. It is well documented that the studio has suffered numerous catastrophes. Beyond the typical on-set accidents, a massive fire in 1995 devoured much of the historic infrastructure. Locals whisper that the fire didn't just consume wood and canvas. It released something that had been trapped within the constructed reality of the western town. The legend centers specifically on the old saloon set, not the tourist-friendly facade, but the original interior used for brutal shootouts and grim poker games. Many believe a stuntman, fatally injured during a difficult sequence involving a balcony fall in the 1960s, never truly left the location, his last breath tied to the illusion of the Wild West. Night watchmen who patrol the premises report strange, specific phenomena near the reconstructed jailhouse and the saloon's ruined foundation. They describe not cold spots or slamming doors, but auditory hallucinations of terrifying clarity, the sharp, sudden sound of a large body hitting the wooden floor, followed immediately by a ragged, desperate coughing sound, muffled as if through thick fabric. Sometimes the heavy, distinctive scent of theatrical blood, ironic and metallic, will bloom briefly in the dry desert air before vanishing completely. Security camera footage often shows inexplicable disturbances, like shadows moving independently of the moonlight, often coalescing near the spot where the balcony once stood. These incidents reach their peak during the arid summer months. A recent maintenance crew tasked with reinforcing the rickety second-story porch on the bank of Old Tucson, quit abruptly. They claimed that while working late, they clearly heard a voice from the empty street below, a gravelly, tired whisper repeating only 2 words. An actor's final, damning stage direction. Cut. Print. The town is meticulously preserved, an anachronism fixed in time. But beneath the veneer of entertainment, Old Tucson remains a place where the final take never truly ended, trapping its spectral inhabitants forever in a loop of cinematic agony. The haunted bookshop Antigone Books Tucson. The heavy, iron-scented air of the Sonoran afternoon rarely penetrates the close-stacked rooms of Antigone Books. Inside, the silence is thick, broken only by the creak of floorboards responding to invisible pressure. This isn't the quiet of thoughtful browsing. It is the enforced stillness of a repository policed by an unseen proprietary intellect. Longtime staff understand that the shop, an anchor of Tucson's independent spirit, is also a vessel for unfinished literary business. The legend centers around a woman known only in whispers as Clara, a local historian obsessed with the forgotten narratives of Pima County, who died abruptly in the early 1980s. Her magnum opus incomplete, she did not leave the building. Instead, she became interwoven with its structure, particularly the cramped local history annex in the rear. Her energy is not malicious, but relentlessly possessive, seeking eternal control over the arrangement of knowledge within her domain, rejecting any volume she deems historically inaccurate or poorly researched. Evidence of Clara's presence is constant and meticulously documented in the staff log. Books are not merely misplaced, they are actively resorted, often appearing spine-side in or shelved a full number outside their Dewey category. The specific disruption always occurs in the sections Clara reportedly obsessed over: Southwestern ecology and early feminist theory. Employees frequently report icy drafts clinging to the narrow aisles, even during the height of summer, and the distinct, unnerving scent of dry lavender and old paper near the periodicals section. When no one has passed through, on 2 occasions this year, security cameras captured a blurred shadow passing the central circulation desk just moments after closing, though all doors were locked and alarmed. The chilling truth recognized by Antigone's management is that Clara does not seek to scare patrons away. She seeks to optimize their reading. The books she shifts are often exactly what the next customer happens to be looking for, her organizing principle eternal, exhaustive, and utterly beyond human correction. The shop is not haunted by an aggressive phantom, but by an infinitely diligent, spectral librarian whose dedication to scholarship ensures that the shelves are never truly still. 4. Fox Tucson Theater, Tucson. The velvet curtains of the Fox Tucson Theater hang heavy, absorbing the cold drafts that sweep through the restored Spanish colonial revival palace. Built in 1930, the air inside is thick not just with history, but with a palpable sense of lingering presence, a quiet desperation echoing from the Great Depression era, when the theater was a beacon of light against profound darkness. Though magnificent now, the spirit that occupies its upper reaches seems determined to remind visitors of earlier, harsher days. Local lore and persistent employee accounts center on the 3rd floor, particularly the catwalks and the projection booth. This area, largely inaccessible to the public, is allegedly home to the ghost of a former theater manager who reputedly lost everything and took his own life on the premises. His sorrow, they say, is inextricably woven into the infrastructure. Staff report an unnerving chill that drops precipitously around the old ventilation system, accompanied by the distinct smell of stale pipe tobacco and mothballs. Sense entirely out of place in the modern, climate-controlled venue, the manifestations are subtle but terrifyingly personal. Stagehands preparing for shows often report tools being moved, ropes cut clean through, and heavy spotlights swinging slightly on their gimbals when no one is near. During late-night cleanings, custodians frequently hear the distinct sound of someone walking heavily across the plank flooring of the upper balcony. Yet upon inspection, the entire level is deserted and locked. Security cameras have, on several occasions, malfunctioned specifically when focused on the closed booth door. It is a chilling dedication to duty. Perhaps this eternal watch, the spirit is not malevolent, but rather possessive, a silent guardian trapped in the opulence of his lost domain. Visitors who venture near the upper lobby late in the evening sometimes catch a fleeting glimpse of a gaunt shadow figure standing by the closed fire escape doors, forever monitoring the crowd that rushes in and out, a phantom manager ensuring that, even in perpetuity, the show must go on. FANG, Hotel McCoy, Tucson. The desert night air hangs heavy, whispering secrets around the mid-century modern architecture of Hotel McCoy, a beacon of retro charm near downtown Tucson. But beneath the vibrant facade and the cheerfully painted murals lies a deeper history, a patina of suffering that refuses to fade entirely before it was reborn as a trendy boutique spot. The structure served for decades as a standard, unremarkable roadside motel, the kind where people checked in carrying heavy burdens, sometimes leaving them behind forever. Locals speak vaguely of a string of suicides in the 1970s and 80s. Desperate acts committed in the anonymity of identical rooms, incidents the management preferred to quietly forget. The pervasive sense of unease centers primarily on the old, unrenovated laundry and utility tunnels beneath the central courtyard. Staff often refuse to go down alone, reporting sudden, drastic drops in temperature and the unmistakable scent of cheap, stale cologne mixed with mothballs. The legend claims that one long-term resident, an older man named Silas, who had been abandoned by his family, died alone in room 127 after the air conditioning failed during a blistering August heat wave. His body lay undiscovered for 3 days, the desert heat accelerating the decay, trapping his final, searing misery in the concrete. Silas, or whatever entity remains, is not malicious, but profoundly possessive of the silence. Guests in rooms near the former 127, now 227 after renumbering, frequently report disturbances around 3 am. They wake to the sound of the television volume decreasing steadily, despite the remote being placed out of reach. More unnerving are the visual reports. Shadows that momentarily fill the gaps between the curtains, too solid to be moonlight, or the sight of a fleeting, gaunt figure reflected in the pool's surface, staring up at the second-floor balconies. The most recent documented account comes from a night auditor who swore she saw an old suitcase, heavy, canvas and rusted, sitting by the ice machine on the ground floor. As she approached to tag it, the suitcase began to slide slowly back into the shadow of the vending alcove, leaving no drag marks on the pristine tile. When she turned on her flashlight, the spot was empty, the only lingering evidence the residual, bone-deep cold that seemed to permeate the air, a chilling reminder that some residents never truly check out. 6. The Rialto Theater, Tucson. The humid desert air of downtown Tucson often clings heavy, but within the decaying velvet and gilt of the historic Rialto Theater, a distinct chill settles, unresponsive to the scorching Arizona sun outside. It is an enduring cold that whispers of long-ago tragedies and performances that never truly ended. When the house lights dim and the last patrons exit, the theater becomes a vault for unsettled memories, a stage upon which spectral drama plays out nightly. Opened in 1920, the Rialto has suffered numerous fires, closures, and renovations, each layer of its history cementing deeper into the foundation. The imprint of past lives. Legend holds that the most persistent resident is a former projectionist, or perhaps a stagehand, a man whose attachment to the flicker of the celluloid reel and the roar of the crowd surpassed the limits of mortality. Staff often recount an unnerving sensation of being watched from the darkened balcony, the feeling of invisible hands grazing the back of their necks as they cross the silent main floor. The hauntings manifest with deliberate, almost theatrical precision. Electrical surges occur only in the projection booth, even when the power is isolated. Stage equipment, secured just hours before, is found tampered with, microphones inexplicably moved or sandbags relocated. Most unsettling are the acoustic phenomena, soft coughing emanating from the empty upper loge, followed by a barely audible, icy whisper of a name. Stage managers conducting final checks report catching a fleeting glimpse of a tall, gaunt shadow dissolving into the deep crimson stage curtains. One technician, tasked with repairing an ancient spotlight, swore he saw the shadow solidify, a man standing motionless in the aisle, wearing a uniform subtly different from any modern staff attire. When he called out, the figure simply tilted its head, a gesture of silent disapproval, before the temperature in the room plummeted violently. The spotlight technician abandoned his work, leaving the tools behind. They were later found neatly stacked, centered directly under the dead spotlight, a silent, meticulous message from the Rialto's unseen stage manager that the show, no matter how long the theater is closed, must always go on. St. Augustine Cathedral, Tucson. The air inside St. Augustine Cathedral remains unnaturally cold, a stark refusal of the Tucson heat, clinging to the massive mesquite doors. Late at night, when the light filtering through the stained glass has completely died, the vast nave becomes a basin of impenetrable shadow. Custodians and parish priests, tasked with locking the heavy iron gates after midnight services, speak less of the sanctity of the structure and more of its profound, echoing solitude, a solitude that often feels deeply shared. Maintenance crews frequently report a distinct pressure in the air around the altar, a sensation of being scrutinized even when the church is empty. The current structure, with its iconic white towers and magnificent rosette window, stands upon layers of much older foundations, dating back to Spanish colonial mission efforts. It is said that in the earliest burial grounds beneath the original sanctuary, the remains of Father Ramon, a demanding and fiercely traditional priest who served in the 1880s, were inadvertently displaced during the major 1928 renovations. According to contemporary accounts, Father Ramon had vowed that even in death, he would oversee the proper reverence of the Eucharist and ensure the cathedral never slipped into secular apathy, refusing to rest if his resting place was ever disturbed. The resulting manifestations are not violent, but pervasive and possessive. The most frequent occurrence begins in the sacristy, where the distinct smell of heavy, antique incense, a strong blend, long since discontinued, will abruptly flood the small room, only to vanish instantly, leaving behind a sterile cold spot. More chillingly, security footage often captures a long, dark shadow moving with a shuffling gait across the sanctuary floor after 3 Zlame. It never fully resolves into the shape of a person, but always that of someone draped in long, heavy vestments, momentarily blocking the light sensors near the tabernacle before dissolving into the heavy shadows of the choir loft. Those who have worked overnight maintenance confirm the unsettling reality, the faint, rhythmic sound of a heavy silver censer swinging slowly, audible only when standing directly beneath the main dome. It is a slow, methodical percussion that confirms the endless vigilance of an invisible presence, reminding those who listen that Father Ramon keeps his eternal cold watch over the silent stone heart of Tucson. 8. The Tucson Presidio San Agustin del Tucson Museum, Tucson. The afternoon heat in Tucson never truly dissipates. It merely settles into the adobe, waiting for darkness. The reconstructed walls of the Presidio San Agustin del Tucson, faithful to the Spanish outpost established in 1775, feel less like a historical monument and more like a massive, heat-soaked grave marker. Within these confined courtyards, the silence often carries a profound weight, the pressure, of 2 centuries of desperate survival and violent death. The original inhabitants, Spanish soldiers and their families, lived under constant siege. Their hold on the Arizona desert tenuous and often paid for in blood against hostile forces and the ravages of disease. Archaeological digs confirm the intensity of the struggle. The soil beneath the foundations has yielded countless artifacts of suffering, including human remains hurriedly interred. It is this concentration of trauma that fuels the residual haunting of the site. Security staff and docents report inexplicable movements within the cramped sentry box, a reconstruction where guards faced the highest risk of attack. They frequently describe the heavy, rhythmic trudge of leather boots on packed earth when no one is present, sounds that cut off sharply near the reconstructed chapel, hinting at interrupted prayers or eternal vigilance. Visitors frequently feel intense cold spots, even when the desert air is sweltering, particularly near the northeast corner, where the original barracks stood. The museum's most famous account involves a tall, gaunt figure often glimpsed standing watch atop the ramparts just after sunset. This apparition, described uniformly as wearing a sun-bleached uniform and a leather cuirass, is not merely passive. On several documented occasions, he has seemingly reacted to modern lights or voices, manifesting a deep, audible sigh or a whisper of alarm in archaic Spanish. These encounters often leave witnesses with a feeling of overwhelming paranoia, as if they are suddenly exposed to unseen dangers lurking just beyond the thick adobe walls. The current museum serves as a chilling testament to the fact that violence rooted in historical ground is rarely peaceful. The Presidio is not merely haunted by its past, but actively patrolled by it, a duty-bound garrison of specters still standing guard against a threat that ended centuries ago, forever trapped in the unforgiving dust of San Agustin. Known, Mission San Xavier del Bac, Tucson. The Mission San Xavier del Bac rises from the Sonoran desert floor like a brilliant white monument to misplaced faith. Even under the brutal Tucson sun, a chilling stillness permeates the adobe walls, a silence deeper than reverence. Built in the late 1700s, this intricate jewel, the white dove of the desert, stands above layers of trauma, centuries of famine, epidemic disease, military occupation, and the forced conversion that cost the native Tohono O'odham so many lives. Every footfall echoes across ground that serves as an immense, unblessed cemetery, where the remains of Pima rebels, Apache raid victims, and Jesuit pioneers lie inextricably mingled. The restless spiritual energy centers around the mission's stunning, yet incomplete, architecture. Local lore claims that the souls trapped here are those who died before receiving final rites, or Spanish padres too devoted or perhaps too guilty to leave their posts. Maintenance crews and Franciscan brothers report specific spectral activities concentrated in the rear mortuary chapel and the high choir loft. The temperature inside the nave often drops sharply, frequently accompanied by the distinct, sickening smell of aged incense and sulfur. Just moments before vague, hooded figures manifest near the altar rail. The most persistent haunting involves the elaborate statuary that crowds the sanctuary. Visitors often notice the painted glass eyes of certain carved figures, particularly those of the crucifixion scene, seem to follow them as they move through the vast room. More disturbing is the documented disappearance of small devotional objects and the legend of the missing Eye of God. Diakolke, a golden relic locals believe simply vanished because the entity it represented chose to turn away from the suffering within late at night. Security cameras have repeatedly captured deep, unidentifiable shadows moving between the altar pieces. Shadows that do not reflect the faint desert moonlight filtering through the high windows. The vast, cold darkness of San Xavier del Bac remains perpetually restless, holding its silence and its dead. San Pedro Chapel, Tucson. The dust devils whispered across the cracked earth of Tucson, stirring the dry air around the San Pedro Chapel. It stands unassuming, a humble adobe monument of sun-bleached ochre and weathered wood, dedicated to Saint Peter and rooted in a history of forgotten rituals and fervent faith. But beneath its placid exterior lies a deep well of suffering, the kind that anchors a spirit to sacred ground long after its body has turned to grit. Locals know that the chapel, founded by the pioneering Ori and Montano families, is less a house of God and more a repository for a restless soul. The central legend concerns a woman, Dona Esperanza, whose devotion was matched only by her sorrow. She was said to have died tragically, perhaps in childbirth or due to a sudden, virulent fever, right within the cool confines of the chapel nave. Denied the last rites she desperately sought, her connection to the place was so absolute that her essence never departed. When the afternoon light slants through the small, high windows, illuminating the rough-hewn pews, a profound cold settles over the room, an unnatural drop in temperature that defies the desert heat outside. Visitors often report the distinct, acrid scent of burnt incense and old roses, immediately followed by the sensation of a cold, skeletal hand brushing the nape of their neck. Esperanza's presence is most concentrated near the altar. People kneeling there have heard a faint, distressed weeping sound, muffled as if coming from behind the thick adobe walls. Others have seen her, a spectral, shimmering silhouette kneeling rigidly at the front, her face obscured by a mantilla, sometimes dissolving entirely if acknowledged directly. On moonless nights, the chapel's bell tower remains silent, yet the chilling resonance of a single, slow toll can be heard echoing across the nearby washes. It is the sound of eternal mourning, a spiritual alarm clock for the unburied grief of Dona Esperanza. She remains the desolate, unseen sentinel of San Pedro, forever waiting in the shadows of the altar for a forgiveness that never arrives, trapping the living in the periphery of her endless, silent lament. Evergreen Cemetery, Tucson. The air over Tucson is usually a dry furnace, but within the sprawling acreage of Evergreen Cemetery, a profound, unnatural chill often settles long after sunset. Founded in 1907, Evergreen is a sprawling chronicle of the city's early pioneers, veterans, and forgotten citizens. Its aged headstones, bleached white by the relentless Arizona sun, stand in rows that seem too quiet, too orderly for the chaos of the surrounding desert. Visitors often describe a deep sense of observation here, the feeling of walking through a crowded room where every gaze is fixed, yet utterly silent, monitoring your passage from the shade of pepper trees and cholla thickets. The most notorious spectral resident is known simply as the Lady in White, popularly identified as Clara Jenkins, a young woman who succumbed tragically to consumption in 1915. Her specific plot, located near the oldest section, is marked by a severely eroded marble angel whose face is perpetually stained with what locals claim is moisture, even in the driest months. The tragic legend holds that Clara's restless spirit is not entirely confined to her grave, but instead remains tethered to the main access road, perpetually searching for the fiancé who reportedly abandoned her shortly before her death. Accounts of Clara's presence are unnervingly consistent across decades of local reports. Drivers on North Oracle Road frequently report seeing a faint, luminous figure hitchhiking at the cemetery entrance late at night. When they slow down to offer help, the shimmering figure abruptly dissolves into the scrub brush and shadows. Furthermore, groundskeepers and late-shift police patrolmen detail incidents of severe electronic malfunctions near the large central mausoleum. Specifically, the abrupt draining of fully charged car batteries and sharp static spikes in two-way radios that are otherwise clear. Even more disturbing are the consistent auditory phenomena. The faint, sorrowful sound of a woman weeping near the oldest pauper section, often accompanied by the distinct, heavy scent of dried lavender. Evergreen Cemetery is not merely a resting place. It is a retention pond for accumulated sorrow. The desert preserves its dead too well, and the cold stillness experienced within its gates is not the peace of eternity, but the suffocating proximity of souls who refuse to let the relentless Tucson heat erase their misery. And 12. El Tiradito Wishing Shrine, Tucson. The low glow of the votive candles barely cut the desert chill that clings to the base of Sentinel Peak, painting the small, crumbling adobe shrine in flickering shadow. This is El Tiradito, the wishing shrine, a monument not to a saint, but to a sin, an unauthorized grave built upon a buried scandal. The air here hangs thick, tasting of old wax, dry dust, and a profound, lingering heartbreak. Visitors leave notes slipped into the cracks of the stucco, desperate pleas for love, luck, or forgiveness, hoping the restless spirit of the enshrined outcast will intercede. The legend claims the shrine holds the remains of Juan Oliveras, a humble sheepherder or perhaps a traveling salesman who was killed in the 1870s. The details blur, but the essential tragedy remains: a forbidden love affair, the scorned husband's pistol, and a burial outside of consecrated ground, denied entrance to heaven, purgatory, or even the town cemetery. Juan's unquiet soul became anchored to this desolate spot. The initial offerings were scraps of paper, torn fabric, and bottles of water left by those who believed a soul rejected by God might sympathize with the desperate. Today, those sympathetic energies manifest in unsettling ways. Locals report the phenomenon of the perpetual flicker. Even in absolute stillness, certain candles near the grave's center will spontaneously extinguish and then relight themselves, mimicking the flutter of labored breathing. More disturbing are the auditory anomalies. Whispers so thin they are felt rather than heard, often accompanying the removal of a deeply personal wish note. Sometimes the ink on the notes bleeds, despite the dry climate, tracing thick, rust-colored streaks across the paper as if weeping through the fibers. The final terror is reserved for those who mock the shrine or attempt to steal the offerings. A few years ago, a student took a handful of coins. The next day, his truck broke down exactly 1 mile from the shrine, its engine flooded with inexplicable brackish water. He walked back, replaced the coins, and the vehicle started instantly. El Tiradito grants wishes, yes, but it exacts a price for its service, demanding solemn respect from those who dare to petition the lonely, unblessed dead of Tucson. "13. Arizona Inn, Tucson. The desert night descends upon Tucson, a silence broken only by the rustle of dry palms near the venerable Arizona Inn. Established in 1930, its Spanish colonial architecture, once a beacon of sun-drenched luxury, now seems to absorb the shadows, holding the history of the elite who once sought refuge within its adobe walls. Yet, some guests, it is whispered, never truly checked out. The inn, known for its antique charm, is also notorious for an air of unsettling permanence, especially after midnight. The most enduring legend centers around the inn's original owner, Isabella Greenway, a formidable political figure and close friend of Eleanor Roosevelt. Though officially passing away peacefully elsewhere, her spirit is believed to maintain a proprietary presence here, deeply attached to the property she poured her life into. Reports often pinpoint the Greenway Suite and the adjoining hallways, where a faint scent of old rosewater and expensive tobacco smoke, though no one is actively smoking, often manifests. Staff have grown accustomed to the faint, unexplained jingle of keys or the sudden cold drafts that sweep through locked, air-conditioned rooms. Beyond the owner's lingering authority, the inn harbors darker energies. Room 204 is considered the most active nexus of paranormal phenomena, Guests report the sensation of being watched intently in the early hours of the morning, sometimes waking to find a rocking chair slowly moving in the corner, though there is no breeze. One particularly chilling account involves a businessman who awoke to find a heavy antique dresser pressed against the door from the inside, a terrifying blockade that required the strength of 2 maintenance workers to move, even though the room had been empty hours before. The pervasive feeling is not one of malice, but of trapped desperation. The Arizona Inn remains a stunning landmark, but beneath the veneer of historical elegance, the past is never far away. As the sun rises over the Catalina Mountains, the shadows retreat, but the feeling persists that the inn is not merely preserved, but actively monitored by its ethereal residents. The staff simply suggests that when turning off the lights, it is best not to look directly into the darkened mirrors. Some things, they advise, are better left undisturbed in the silent heat of the Arizona morning. 14. University of Arizona, Old Main, Tucson. The Arizona desert air, even at midnight, often carries a deceptive warmth, but inside the sturdy brick shell of Old Main, a palpable, tomb-like chill clings to the shadowed halls. Built in 1891, the oldest structure on the University of Arizona campus often seems less a building and more a deep-rooted taphonomic specimen, preserving memories best left buried. Students rushing past on late nights rarely look up at the third-story windows, especially after learning the unofficial history that overshadows the official dedication plaque. The enduring legend centers on a young man named Richard, whose tragic death, rumored to be a suicide over academic failure or lost love, occurred within the administrative offices near the central stairwell decades ago. Richard never left. His presence, less an apparition and more a localized atmospheric disturbance, is most acutely felt when the building is quietest, often around 3:00 a.m. Custodians and campus police consistently report the strong scent of pipe tobacco, a heavy, sweet smell common in the early 20th century, wafting through the second and third floors. Though smoking has been strictly prohibited for 50 years, the hauntings are subtle but deeply unsettling. Doors that slam shut with the weight of old oak, only to be found securely locked moments later. Bookshelves in the unused archival rooms rearranging themselves overnight. The most consistent reports involve the main staircase. People climbing the stairs often feel a sudden, intense pressure, as if someone unseen is pushing them from behind, or notice a fleeting shadow at the periphery of their vision, always just one step above or below them. One groundskeeper, having worked decades around Old Main, claims the spirit isn't malicious, merely deeply melancholic. Yet, the chilling signature remains. Late one October night, an alarm technician reported seeing dust motes swirling against the backlight of a utility closet, momentarily coalescing into the distinct outline of a tall, slouched figure. When the technician flipped the light on, the figure vanished, leaving behind only the undeniable, oppressive silence and the faint, unmistakable smell of forgotten pipe tobacco. 15. The Loft Cinema, Tucson. The scent of stale popcorn and ozone clings to the concrete walls of the Loft Cinema, a Tucson institution where independent dreams flicker to life. But after the last patrons shuffle out and the house lights dim, the air pressure drops perceptibly, signaling a residency far older than any current film print. The building, having served many lives before settling into cinematic permanence, retains fragments of those previous existences, particularly a heavy, residual energy that congregates around the projection booth and the tiered seating of Theater 1. Local legend ties the haunting to the mid-1970s, back when the building was briefly a troubled, low-rent storage facility prone to unexplained electrical failures and minor fires. The unofficial narrative revolves around a night security guard, identified only as Pete, who reportedly locked himself into the small, dark projection room after suffering a catastrophic mental break. He was found 3 days later, starved and raving, Surrounded by dozens of empty film reels he had unspooled and meticulously shredded into ribbons. Though Pete was subsequently institutionalized and later passed away, his profound anxiety and the intense claustrophobia of his final days allegedly bonded his emotional imprint to the structure itself. The manifestations are subtle, often dismissed by day staff as typical infrastructural decay or electrical faults. However, technicians frequently report the sound of rapid, heavy breathing emanating from the locked projection booth when it is demonstrably empty. More disturbing are the instances recorded during late-night cleanings. Employees have witnessed seats in Theater 1, specifically Row G, Seat 15, folding down sharply on their own, often followed by a brief, ice-cold gust of air that smells faintly of burnt celluloid. Custodians also refuse to work near the old emergency stairwell beside the concession stand, claiming to hear the distinct, rhythmic scratching sound of fingernails dragging across metal. The ghost of the loft is not seeking justice or recognition. It is merely trapped in endless repetition, perpetually waiting for a movie that never starts. It remains a captive audience to silence, a permanent fixture in the dark, watching those who watch the screen and quietly ensuring that Row G, Seat 15, is always ready for its anxious, solitary presence. And that wraps up our terrifying tour of Tucson's top 15 haunted locations. From the historic whispers of the Hotel Congress to the chilling confines of the Fox Theater, Tucson proves it's truly a city with ghosts. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please hit like and subscribe for more Arizona history and hauntings. And let us know in the comments which ghost story spooked you the most. Good night and sleep tight.